Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope your day is starting off as fantastic as it possibly can. There's our Prime Minister speaking at the EU summit in Brussels, which just concluded. And in the backdrop, there is the EU flag and the Canadian flag, and no US flag. It was actually billed as the EU-Canada summit, sans USA, and our Prime Minister went there and was able to come back with a signed agreement. And it's a very profound shift in Canadian policy, and it could have a huge effect on our economy going forward. And in this video, I'm just going to review a couple of the key details that came out of this summit that you might not have heard reported, and how those will play out for our economy. And I have to say that the more and more I see Mark Carney in action, I can sense that he's completely focused in every one of his decisions and every one of his meetings and every one of the deals that he signs. What's forefront in his mind is economy, economy, economy. In this EU-Canada summit, I think he's successfully nudged Canada a little bit closer to the EU and moved us a little bit farther from the USA. And once again, took a couple of direct shots at the USA, but not in a bad way. Let me go through some of the details with you and explain what I mean. Reported here on Yahoo Finance, they explain the agreement between Canada and the EU member countries commits Canada and Europe, notice that, Canada, standalone country, and European Union, to collaborate on defense, and is a step towards Canada participating in the continent's massive new defense procurement program known as Rearm Europe. I'll get into the details here on how this can affect the Canadian economy in a big way. But let me read some of the comments that Mark Carney made during the summit. And again, they're a direct jab at the United States. He said, "We are going to build trading relationships with like-minded partners, reliable partners." He goes on to say, "The future of trade does have this defense cooperation. An allied industrial policy will make us stronger. That's the future of trade, not a narrow discussion on tariffs." A direct shot again at the United States. He's basically saying that cooperation of industrial policy with like-minded countries, that's the future of trade. Not what the United States is interested in, which he characterizes as a narrow discussion on tariffs. Let me summarize what a joint statement between Canada and the EU that was released on Monday said. And there's a list of things here that are touched on just below me in the text. And you can read those, but there's one key point that I want to zero in on because this could be huge for Canada. And that point is the sixth one on the list, which states cooperation on defense procurement, which means the European Union and Canada will work together as they procure, and that's basically as they seek contracts to fund this massive increase in spending that Europe is planning to rearm itself. And by massive amount of spending, I mean, as summarized here in an article on CBC News, the agreement opens the door for Canadian companies to participate in the $1.25 trillion, with a T, Rearm Europe program, which is seen as a step towards making Canada less reliant on and less vulnerable to the whims of the United States. Now, I think this reporting is getting it a little bit wrong. I don't think they're seeing the big picture. Yes, this is a step away from the United States and a step closer to the EU, which I mentioned myself at the beginning of this video. But to have Canadian companies be able to participate in the procurement process of a $1.25 trillion business, which is $1.2 trillion of new spending that's going to happen, this is massive. Because if you think about how this money is going to get spent and dig into the details a little bit, you'll see that Canada has huge potential here. The $1.25 trillion is going to be spent on defense, but that doesn't mean that just defense companies are going to participate in this new economy or this new spending. In an article here from Royal Bank of Canada, where they do some research on Canada defense companies, they summarize here that Canada's defense production industry spans three core domains. But let me get to the numbers here. It generates $14.3 billion in revenue from 586 firms. $14.3 billion is not a big defense industry. Canada has a tiny, tiny defense industry. So How is it going to participate in a $1.3 trillion procurement program? How much benefit is that going to have to Canada? Well, number one, these industries now, the ball is in their court to step up to the plate and actually try and participate and compete and try and grow their businesses. They can now try and compete and try and participate in some of the contracts as Canada and Europe increase their defense spending. But that's not the total story. Mark Carney is a shrewd businessman, and he understands how the economy is all related. So if Europe has a plan of rearming itself and spending over $1 trillion, that's much more than Canada will spend on its own defense industry. But if Canada can participate in those procurement of those contracts, a lot of that spending is going to be done by European defense companies. But when they build things like tanks and planes and munitions and all the things that you need to spend that money on, what are the ingredients to those types of things? Well, they're going to need lots of aluminum, they're going to need lots of steel, they're going to need lots of critical minerals. And having Canada as a partner now is a very important ingredient in that. Where they might have got critical minerals from Russia in the past, why not have a country that's more aligned with their values on the team? Canada is in a position where we can supply everything Europe needs. We are the huge resource. Canada is the size of Europe. We have all the raw materials to supply the whole thing. And isn't that perfect timing, since our neighbor to the south has decided that they want to pay more for all that stuff? They have import tariffs on our steel and aluminum. They want to pay more for our stuff. They want to tax their own industries if they import products from us. So this is perfect timing. Mark Carney is always thinking 2-3 steps ahead. He wants to create new trade relationships, new supply chains, new customers, new alliances. Once we become part of this group and are accepted and our companies are on the list of companies that can participate in procurement, when a country in Europe wants to build X amount of planes or X amount of tanks or whatever they want to build, Canadian companies are going to be on that list. We can source the materials from Canada. And in defense spending, those types of things are very controlled. It's not a free trade situation where you can just find the cheapest stuff anywhere in the world. And that's why Canada and the United States have always had this slightly uncomfortable relationship when it came to defense spending. Because despite what the Americans say, that they've always subsidized Canada, they've always protected Canada, and we spend all the money on defense while you guys are freeloaders, it's actually the other way around from Canada's perspective, because the way the dynamic has always worked is the United States has always wanted Canada to spend more and more on defense. Not on defending itself, just spend more on defense, more defense spending. And what that always meant was Canada needed to buy more equipment from the United States, because the United States controls all the military industrial complex. Everything is proprietary. If you want to be allies with the United States and participate in NORAD or NATO, the US always demanded Canada that we buy the equipment from them. They hold the software, they build the stuff, everything's proprietary. They were never very comfortable with Canada doing its own research and development. Developing our own military hardware, our own ideas. Think of the Avro Arrow in the past. They were more interested in just having Canada spend the money and having all the stuff manufactured in the United States. And it is a fact that over the past decades, the procurement part of Canada's military spending has been something like 70 or 80% just goes to the United States. Basically a direct transfer from the Canadian government to the United States military complex. So Canada increasing military spending in the old way as a partner to the US just meant that the Canadian government would basically give a big transfer of money to the US economy. And now, if we realign more with the Europeans, we can provide inputs to that massive increase of spending that they want to do, things that Canada has that they don't have. So this is a perfect new relationship. It's another perfect way for Canada to distance itself a little bit more from the United States and get closer to some more like-minded allies. Now, as I release this video, Mark Carney is on his way to the next summit, the NATO summit. And of course, Donald Trump wants to be center stage at this. I don't even know if he's going to show up, but he's already taken over the agenda which would have been about talking about the Russia-Ukraine war or the Israel-Iran war. And now he's taken over that agenda by suggesting that increasing military spending to 2% of GDP isn't good enough, and the new level should be 5%. And of course, this is just a simple Donald Trump strategy to control the narrative, and everyone will fall in line, and the media will fall in line, and all we'll be talking about now in the media for the next several days is, should we all increase military spending to 5%? Donald Trump says we should increase it to 5%. Let's discuss that. Let's not discuss Ukraine or Iran. And the media will fall into this trap, and uninformed people in the United States will believe, yeah, those countries should spend 5%, just like us. Shown on the graph behind me here from the World Bank website, where they track United States defense spending over time from 1960 to present. You can see just below me here that since 2015 to 2025, for the past 10 years, the United States defense spending has hovered somewhere between 3 and 4%. So even the United States is not at 5% right now. Perhaps Donald Trump's plan is that he wants to increase United States military spending to 5%. We'll see what comes out of that NATO summit. But once again, what I observe here is that Mark Carney is really connected. He knows all of those leaders from the EU through his time as being the governor of the Bank of England. Not only is he really connected, but he really understands how the economy works. And he's always trying to connect things so that there's a bigger impact. A simple-minded leader might just say, yeah, we're going to increase military spending to 3%. We're just going to spend the money. We'll buy the stuff from the United States, and we'll just send those billions of dollars to the United States in their economy, and their companies will build the stuff for us, and then we'll just take possession of them. That's one way of increasing your military spending. But what Mark Carney is trying to do is he's trying to do it in a little bit more intelligent way by creating an alliance, an economic and military alliance, getting accepted into this EU procurement program so that not only can we increase our military spending, not only can we have closer allies, but maybe our economy can benefit in a huge way as we supply a lot of the materials, and our defense companies can step up and have access to more market and put our good Canadian engineering and know-how, put it on the table and try and sell it, try and break into that market. And he's doing what a prime minister should do, not just have his government hand over the money, but try to create an economic environment where Canadian companies can prosper without just a government handout. Try and create the situation where the building blocks are in place, the alliances are in place, the deals are in place, and then Canadian companies can take advantage of this on their own. They don't need their hands held. If we keep having these types of deals made, this is going to unleash the Canadian economy. Think of what's just happened recently with this deal and the decreasing of barriers for interprovincial trade. New legislation that was just passed in the House of Commons where Canada can now fast-track nation-building projects. I'll discuss that in a future video. But once again, more positive news for Canada. And once again, a common theme, we're getting closer to our European allies and a little farther from the United States. And that's exactly what the United States wants. They view themselves as the biggest economy and they deserve a bigger piece of the pie. Well, what the United States is going to accomplish is they're going to have a bigger piece of a smaller pie. They can be isolationist and they can have a bigger piece of just the American pie. Canada can share a small piece of the world's pie. And a small piece of the world's pie can end up being much bigger than a big piece of just the American pie. Did I say the word pie too many times in that discussion? That's all I got for you all today. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Leave some comments. I always like to read your perspective on the discussion. And have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll catch you all on the next one.